All right. Well, we're back in Proverbs. I like the Proverbs. There's a lot of them. And it's kind of appropriate. This is kind of breaking up our journey into Lamentations. And you can kind of pick up how the different types of poetry make you feel different ways. There's this thing that happens in Proverbs where it's like this rhythmic, right? So it's like the contrast of this is dumb, this is smart, this is dumb, this is smart, this is smart, this is smart, this is dumb, this is dumb, right? And there's this like rhythmic aspect to it, even as it goes all the way through. Lamentations is different. It doesn't do that. And we're going to get into exactly how it rhythmically fits its theme next week, because we're in Proverbs today. We got a lot of Proverbs to get through. Some of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of them together. I'm just going to read a few. You see that list in front of you. Our topic today is pretty straightforward. It's good to take advice. It's good to receive instruction from someone else, to receive the wisdom that another person has to offer, and it's foolish not to. That's the premise. So we're going to get straight into it. We're going to start with where the passage we're going to read to set this off is in chapter 22. So we're going to read chapter 22, verses 17 to 21. So I'll give you a second to turn there. But I kind of want to set up one thing before I read it. Taking advice is not something we usually associate with God, but it is something that God does. Isn't that strange? There's this thing in theology called the divine council. The divine council are the people and angelic beings and the beings around God that he asks questions to. What should we do about this? We're like, doesn't he know? And doesn't the divine council know he knows? But they all serve this purpose, right? There's even one point, he's like, how shall I affect Israel and those that I need to judge? And then one of them says, send lying prophets. So yes, that's what we'll do. We'll send lying prophets. You even think about this scene in Job. God is in heaven and Satan's there. Satan means the accuser, and the accuser's like, Job's not that great. And God says, okay, all right. I see what you're saying, Satan. I think you're wrong. I think we're going to prove it. All right? But you have this scene where this dialogue happens, and God almost seems to take a suggestion. Okay? So if that's in God's nature, if he's surrounded by the 24 elders and the living beings, and they make requests, and they have the prayers of the saints in their hands, like we talked about when we were reading Revelation 6, if God's receiving things and taking suggestions, and he's God, you see it might be a little silly, a little foolish, if we're like, I don't need to take suggestions. Because God doesn't need anything. He's not lacking in wisdom. Right? And we are. And so it doesn't make any sense for a being that isn't lacking in any way and knows everything and knows what he intends to do and yet has a divine counsel for us not to take counsel. That doesn't make any sense. And so we see that that's very core to what wisdom is. So let's get into Proverbs and see the different ways it describes this and how it sets it up. So Proverbs chapter 22, beginning in verse 17. If you'd all stand with me for the reading of God's word. Proverbs chapter 22, beginning in verse 17. Incline your ear and hear the words of the wise and apply your heart to my knowledge. For it will be pleasant if you keep them within you, if all of them are ready on your lips, that you may trust, that your trust may be in the Lord. I have made known to you today, even to you. Have I not written for you 30 sayings of counsel and knowledge to make you know what is right and true, that you may give a true answer to those that sent you? These are the words of God. You may be seated. Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you for the wisdom given to us in Proverbs and the wisdom given to us in your word, and that Christ has come and has opened our hearts and given us the Holy Spirit to understand. Help us understand more of what you say and what you direct us to. Help us know and seek out wisdom that we too may be like Christ. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Now, if this is your first Proverbs sermon, what we're doing is we preached through the first 9 chapters of Proverbs, and then in chapter 10, it goes into this list, right? Bunch of different kinds of Proverbs. And so what we're doing is at each verse, I'll take that verse and then go to all the other Proverbs throughout the rest of the book that are thematically tied to that verse. And then I'll go back and I'll do the next one that I haven't done yet. We're on verse 8 of chapter 10. So this is the one that kicked off our theme. Verse 8 says, "The wise of heart will receive commandments, but a babbling fool will come to ruin." There's this break of the wise and the foolish, and it says this marker, this distinction between the wise and the foolish is the ability to receive commandments. Now, as we go through this, there's 3 things we're going to talk about at the end, and I'm just going to give them to you right up front so we can kind of hold them in our minds as we go through. The first is that the humility to receive instruction is pivotal to actually being wise. We're actually going to hit a verse later that says, if you take advice for a while and then stop, you'll actually become foolish, right? So this is an endurance thing. You don't reach a point where you don't need advice suddenly. You need counsel. This will continue to be the case. It actually becomes a pitfall for many people that start to imagine that they've arrived and then don't need counsel anymore, and suddenly they start to divert and they start to become foolish because they don't receive counsel. They did for a while, and so maybe it seemed like they were wise, but then they stopped. So this is a tie-in. That's the first thing, is the humility to receive counsel. The second is that you need to understand that God is the primary counselor you need. He's the one that actually has the wisdom, and the abundance of counselors around you is all to figure out what he's after. Okay? So you need to know the scriptures in order to do that. So an abundance of counselors is one thing. You need them. You need the humility to hear them. Number 2, the reason you need that is because you need to know the will of God. You need to understand him. The third thing is you need to start being able to tell the difference between a good and a bad counselor. The difference between someone that gives you good advice and bad advice. And it's going to separate those throughout. There's this thing that can happen is if I'm humble enough to receive instruction, then evil people will see that and say, I can take advantage of that. He's willing to receive instruction, so I want to get in there and steer him in a bad direction. I actually need to be able to tell the difference between good advice and bad advice. So here's the first picture we get. Now, it's not the first picture in Proverbs. You remember the first few chapters. The first chapter is you need to be able to hear me, son. You need to listen. If you can't, you'll die. This is pivotal. So this is a topic that gets a lot of verses in Proverbs. And this image of babbling fools. Blah, 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 blah. Right? What are they saying? Doesn't matter, but it's the only thing they care about. When fools gather together, they each babble and don't listen to each other. I don't care what he says. I just have my own thing to say. But we're going to get into that more later. So this is the image it sets up. The wise of heart receive commandments. The babbling fool comes to ruin. We don't like commandments because they tell us what to do, and I don't like to restrain myself in any way. So you can see one of the first things that hits your heart when you talk about commandments is, I don't want to modify my behavior. I don't want to give up what I want. And so this is going to be a continual theme, the contrast between being able to receive something unpleasant now or refusing to receive something unpleasant now and taking on something much worse later. In this case, ruin. The babbling fool comes to ruin. The next verse that goes into this doesn't take very long to hit it. Chapter 10, verse 17, whoever heeds instruction is on the path of life, but he who rejects reproof leads others astray. So we're going to have to camp on this word for a second, reproof. Something that comes and rebukes. There's an instruction here that you're doing something wrong. We live in a culture. How well do we respond to someone saying, I think you're doing it wrong? Right? It's not super great. We don't usually tell it wrong. We modify our entire language around that. You wouldn't want to suggest that they somehow made a mistake, right? And part of the reason is because we're very bad at receiving that, right? But the difference between the path of life and destruction is the ability to do this or not. And in this verse, we're going to pick up on the second thing. You and I are not isolated people. What we do affects other people. It isn't just that the one that rejects reproof, it comes to ruin, like the past verse says. It's also that they lead others astray. If I refuse to take instruction, guess who else it affects? Anyone else that follows me. Anyone else that says he seems to be on a good track, I'm going to follow him. And it's not something that we should deny. We like to think that our own foolishness doesn't affect anyone but us, but that's not true. We want to pretend that because we're independent thinkers that we don't need anyone else, but the need for counsel demonstrates that's not true. You need other people. You're not isolated. Your goodness or badness, your righteousness or wickedness will affect the people around you and is affected by the people around you. Our next verse is in chapter 11, verse 14. Where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. We attribute most of Proverbs to Solomon. If you guys remember the story of Solomon's son when he takes over the throne, he takes advice from two groups. One is Solomon's advisors. There's old advisors that used to advise the wisest man that ever lived outside of Christ. And then he takes advice from his young friends, right? And we're like, well, I know the right ones, I think. I know this story. I know the right ones to listen to. But we often, when we think about who we take advice from, it's usually our pals, our buddies. It's usually the people that we, the ones that tickle our ears, the ones that tell us what we want to hear. And so Solomon's son, the son of the wisest man to ever live outside of Christ, listens to the advice of his father's advisors and listens to the advice of his pals. And he says, I'm going to take my pal's advice. And he splits the kingdom. Where there's no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. Taking on the insight and wisdom of the people around you actually is a protection. There's something about relying on each other that we don't like to do, but is necessary in order for safety. Our next verse is in chapter 12, verse 1. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. I think sometimes we overuse words, and we're like, I don't know, that doesn't seem very nice, Bible. It's not nice to call someone stupid, right? But we use words so much, sometimes they lose meaning. Well, I think actually even this word ought to hit even harder than it does. Like, he who hates reproof is they're just an idiot, all right? You don't understand. Now, one of the things I love about this verse is that it ties discipline and reproof to your affections. Do you love it? Well, I'll tell you, it's not pleasant to receive discipline. It even says in the New Testament, no discipline seems pleasant at the time. But for mature and wise people, we start to be able to understand the difference between just an insult and something that I'm actually going to grow from. When somebody comes and gives instruction, I will love it because I know the growth that comes from it, not because it feels good, right? We're all looking for something that feels good. Does it not feel good? Well, it's either an insult, which we're going to get to later, or it's reproof that you need. And if you want to live, you need to start to develop a love for it. We don't like reproof because people don't respond well. I won't do it, and nobody will do it to me. But then you stop. How do we respond to reproof? How do we respond when God disciplines us? Do we love it because we know that with it comes wisdom and knowledge? Or do we hate it? Well, then we're stupid. I'm sorry, but no, I'm not. This is what it is. I like it when the Bible's straightforward like that. Oh, you hate discipline? Guess what? You're stupid. And we're all like, have I ever hated discipline? Yes. As children, we don't like it. So it's time to grow up. It's time to love the thing that God uses to grow us. All right, so this is what we need to take. We have to start loving it. All right, we got a lot more verses to get through. It's not going to get easier. Verse 12, 15, and 16. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. And then we're going to tie 16 with it. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. This is one of the first places that's going to separate the difference between wise advice and just insult. Wise advice is something that builds you up. Insult is not intended to do that. It's intended to only tear you down. So how does a wise man respond to that? And he ignores it. But when he gets advice, when he gets reproof, what does a wise man do? He listens to it. Both of them are unpleasant. We often treat them like they're the same. I'll take the insult and be like, oh, this might be wise advice. Or I'll take the wise advice and be like, I don't like insults, so I'm not going to listen. But the fool is right in his own eyes. We're all like this, by the way. We're in such a politicalized world. How much do people just rely on their own insights to live? You know what makes you wrong? Is that you disagree with me. That's the primary reason, right? Like we have all these reasons in our head of why we're not a part of the silliness, but we are. We have to understand that these things are tied. We're not supposed to be wise in our own eyes. The result of that will just be judges. Every man did what was right in his own eyes, and it was chaotic. Nobody obeyed the Lord. Our next verse is in chapter 13, verse 1. A wise son hears his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. The scoffer just laughs. The scoffer just scoffs. Huh, you think you have instruction for me? Now remember, Proverbs starts out with a father-to-son message. One of the things we need to understand about good fatherhood is that I should be able to trust his advice. Because my father's instruction should be coming from someone that loves and cares for me more assuredly than just a random person on the street. Now, as things have been broken up, as the relationships between siblings and children and their parents is broken, we don't automatically think this as much. So we need to, in the place of father, we need to think of the Father, God the Father, and we need to heed his instruction. And we need to understand that he intends good things for us, and if we don't, we'll fall into ruin. Again, in chapter 13, we go down to verse 10. It says this. By insolence comes nothing but strife, but with those who take advice is wisdom. What's interesting, if you're looking for someone who has wisdom, and you're like, how do I tell if they have wisdom? You ask, well, do they take advice? Do they receive counsel? Because the insolent have lots of things to say. They have lots of opinions. And we're like, well, a lot of people have a lot of opinions. Who do I listen to? Well, who listens? That's who you listen to. And that's going to take a little bit of listening, by the way. You'll have to kind of watch and look. Who receives instruction and advice? Because that's who I should take instruction and advice from. Because they're going to have a lot of it. There's a lot of input out there. There's a lot of things to be heard. It ties this to various forms of disgrace. In verse 18 of chapter 13, poverty and disgrace comes to him who ignores instruction, but whoever heeds reproof is honored. Right? We have these things that are not in and of themselves righteousness. It's not righteous or unrighteous to be rich or poor, but they can be tied to whether or not you're righteous or unrighteous. And ignoring instruction, it says, comes with poverty, comes with disgrace. You shouldn't be surprised. Why do things never work out for me? Do you listen to instruction? The answer is no. That's probably why. Right? Well, why is he honored? Why is she lifted up? Well, do they heed reproof? Do they listen? If they do, even people who are struggling with understanding, if they understand that they need to receive instruction, they'll make out better. In fact, honor will come with that. Our next verse is in chapter 15, and it's going to be a repetitive line in this one. In chapter 15, verse 5. A fool despises his father's instruction, but whoever heeds reproof is prudent. Again, we go back to the fatherhood and motherhood. They give wisdom. Ignoring their instruction is an indicator that you're going to ignore everyone else's. If you ignore those that you know love you and care about you, it's not going to go well because not everyone does. We'll go to people that just tell us what we want to hear. So we go again to verse 10 of chapter 15. There is severe discipline for him who forsakes the way. Whoever hates reproof will die. This is sort of a different setup in Proverbs where it does the same thing again and again. It doesn't contrast, it says both. Severe discipline for him who forsakes the way. If you ignore what you know is right, God uses discipline to bring you back. Whoever hates reproof will die. This is the part of the challenge. Okay, we talked about this earlier. Part of the challenge is start loving God's instruction. When he comes and says you're wrong, you need to turn, you need to throw yourself at the mercy of the cross, start to learn to love that feeling. Okay, so we're going to just pause there for a second and sit in that. It isn't just enough to receive instruction. You have to know that when somebody rebukes you or God rebukes you, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good for me to be shown the darkness of my heart. I cannot be surprised when it doesn't feel good. It's not going to. It's not supposed to. I can hide. I can hide my sin, and if I'm in relationship and somebody says, no, but there's sin, and you need to turn, it's not going to feel good because I've been working really hard to hide it. And now there it is. Not only can I see it, I now know that others can see it. And that's even harder. And so this temptation comes up to say, okay, I need to lash out. I need to turn it back on them. It's actually their fault for seeing it. It's their fault for being mean. But that's not what we're called to do. We're not just supposed to receive it. We're supposed to instead be like, oh, God is showing me where he intends to change me next. God is showing me what my next step is. And we need to start to learn to love it. That doesn't happen automatically. That comes with training. You need to put effort into it. Our next verse is verse 22. Without counsel, plans fail. But with many advisors, they succeed. I'm going to tie this to the next verse. To make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. If we start to learn to receive instruction and reproof, when we get good advice, it's going to feel good. Even if it means I have to change something. Like, how am I going to fix this problem? Well, here's what you're doing wrong. Dun, 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 dun. But if I'm wise, I'll understand what it is that's happening. Oh, there it is. That's right. I'm receiving counsel. Without counsel, plans fail. And we need advisors that actually tell us where our blind spots are, by the way. It's very easy to say, I have all these blind spots and I'd very much like to keep blind there. I'm going to bring in people that either have those same blind spots or just tell me what I want to hear. But that's not what we're called to either. Our next verse is in the same chapter. It's the last 3 verses of chapter 15. They go together. The ear that listens to life-giving reproof will dwell among the wise. Whoever ignores instruction despises himself, but he who listens to reproof gains intelligence. The fear of the Lord is instruction and wisdom, and humility comes before honor. So this is tying who is the actual counselor? If you understand as a Christian that God's the one that's changing you, and he's the one that's doing it, whenever you receive good instruction from someone else, understand where that's coming from. If it's good, it's coming from God. And in order to receive it, we need humility. He even says actual honor requires humility to go through it. And if you ignore that instruction and instead try to elevate yourself, that's the same as despising yourself. There's this hatred for yourself that's involved in ignoring instruction and advice. He who listens to reproof gains intelligence. And it's life-giving as well. And how do we receive it? This is key, the humility. The humility to hear. Next verse is in chapter 17, verse 4. An evildoer listens to wicked lips, and a liar gives ear to a mischievous tongue. Here we get the contrast. This is going to be important because the Proverbs isn't just saying take whatever advice you get from anybody. Because guess what? There's liars out there. There's a lot more than you might have initially suspected. An evildoer listens to wicked lips, and a liar gives ears to a mischievous tongue. There's a lot of ways the Bible describes this, right? One of the ways this is the funniest, and I say a lot, is the tickling of the ears. What just tickles your fancy? I'll just tell you that. You know how much easier it is? I'll just make you like me, and I won't care about the truth or falsehood of what I say. I'll just tickle your ears. And an evildoer listens to that. A liar gives ears to mischievous tongue. You see, there's a type of person that is looking to dig their heels in. There's a type of person that wants to be steered by impulse and told that that's right. It isn't the case that I can avoid feeling that reproof and that pain of reproof and still expect to grow. That pain is very often God's intended tool for you. Can't he do it and make it not hurt? And you're like, well, maybe, but it doesn't appear like that's always his goal. It isn't always his goal to make sure you grow as comfortably as possible, right? Like, we don't like that. I wish he would do it another way. Well, he needs to beat that out of us too, apparently. But our job, we have to understand that being wise is not being steered by impulse. And we need to not listen to wicked lips. This comes up again later on, but this goes a little deeper in verse 10 of chapter 17. A rebuke goes deeper into a man of understanding than 100 blows into a fool. This is a direct, like, you can just wail on a fool and it won't matter. Why don't you learn? It doesn't matter. Well, we'll just talk to him. Yeah, that works too, right? It's like, basically what he's saying is a fool isn't going to learn. It doesn't happen. And no matter what you do, they've built their mind in a way that they just won't receive instruction. And if you actually want your efforts to go somewhere, then speak to someone who's wise. Often, there's a lot of effort pouring into somebody who's very determined not to get better, and a deep neglect towards the people that are going to get better or want to. There's all this faithfulness that could be fruitfully poured into good soil, and it keeps me like, what about the seed on the path? Maybe if I water it a lot, the birds won't eat it, right? But he's describing the difference from somebody that's, I want to pour into somebody. I want to like pour out blessing, and I want good fruit to come from it. Well, go to someone who will receive it then, often. Now, that doesn't mean you withhold from someone else who needs it. The Lord's the one that makes it grow, after all. But there's this understanding that a fool, they're determined. They're dug in. And we shouldn't be surprised when nothing comes from it. But if you want to be wise, if you are wise or you're around the wise, it's amazing what a truly wise person can benefit from. They see a strange situation and they become better from just the smallest bit of wisdom, because wisdom's everywhere. It can be received from those with humble hearts. But for those without humble hearts, it doesn't matter how much instruction they receive, it won't grow them. And this is demonstrated further in the next verse, chapter 18, verse 2. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. I don't know anybody like that, I'm sure. I'm sure I'm never like that, right? So you see, there's this part of foolishness that really just loves itself. Oh, I just have the most insight. I just have all the hot takes that everybody wants to hear. There's a delight in the foolishness of a fool in expressing his own opinion. And there's no pleasure in understanding. I think that you need to gain some understanding, fool. Well, I don't take any pleasure in that. You know what I do take pleasure in? Is giving lots of advice. This happens all the time. Somebody whose life is a complete mess, right? Knows everything about life. I know what it takes to live in this life. You're like, well, that's great. Why aren't you taking your own advice then? And either they want to keep being foolish, and they have good advice, they just don't want to follow it, or they just don't know the difference, and they are taking their advice, and that's why they are where they are. And you wonder, like, this sounds silly. What's so tempting about it? Why do we see it everywhere? And we see why in verse 8 of chapter 18. The words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels. They go down to the inner parts of the body. They just taste so good. That's why. Why are we so tempted to gossip? Oof. It just tastes good. That's why. Why do we give bad advice when we know it's bad advice and it's self-destructive? I'll go around and I look at our world like, why is there so many people encouraging everyone else to completely destroy themselves in their selfishness? It's very common for men or women to encourage someone who's asking for advice in their marriage to just divorce them. Oh, just leave them. That sounds terrible, right? Well, why would they do that? Well, it goes down easy. Oh, yeah, the easy out? Yeah, that sounds great. Oh, sure, it'll burn everything up, but it's just easier to receive than actually receiving the rebuke of learning to be wise. Why do we even listen to bad advice? And that's like in a very simple way to describe, because it tastes good. That's why we do it. Why do we give bad advice? Well, because it tastes good. It's poison, but I like candy, right? That's part of why. Verse 19, or chapter 19 is our next verse, in verse 20. Listen to advice and accept instruction that you may gain wisdom in the future. This, again, is the humility thing. And the thing about wisdom is it looks beyond right now. This is why when somebody says, well, this is hard, and everyone's like, well, stop then. Leave. Like, why do they say that? Because all I'm looking at is the right now. How can I make my life easier right now? What about the future? Who cares? We'll deal with the future when it gets here, and we'll worry about the right now then. It's like we'll make more foolish decisions because I'm not thinking generationally. I'm not even thinking about next week. I'm just thinking about right now. What's easiest right now? Not what's right, not what's wise, not what will benefit the people around me. I'm worried about me right now. This is the key feature of a fool, right? They may be very savvy in defending the pleasure of right now at the expense of the future. But wisdom is something that's tapping into an eternal truth, and so it will help you longer. And you see this again in verse 27. This is what I alluded to earlier. Verse 27 of chapter 19, cease to hear instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. So there's this part of our life where we might actually receive instruction pretty well. We receive advice. I know I'm young and I'm dumb, so I need advice. But when I get older, I won't need to receive advice anymore. And what he's saying is you stop receiving it and you start to stray. You stop receiving it and you think you have the wisdom. You don't even realize you're off the path because you're not receiving advice anymore. We're onto the path of fools. This is one of the strange things about many of the things we're good at, right? I'm doing the thing I'm good at. I'm ahead of schedule in my skill set, and I'm doing really well. And then I stop getting better at it because I've arrived. And then all of a sudden, I'm bad at it. And I didn't even realize when that happened. This happened to me in the military. There was a spiritual gift I was fairly competent in, and I took it for granted, and it was suddenly gone, and I didn't realize it until about 6 months after it was gone, and I was operating very poorly in it for about 6 months. When I realized it, I looked around at some of the people around me, at some of my friends, and was like, you knew I was bad at this. And they're like, yeah. Like, why didn't you tell me? I was like, well, they did. Guess what? I wasn't receiving instruction. So I couldn't be surprised. It was gone. I didn't even realize it. I had strayed from the path because I stopped receiving instruction. And this is the nature of instruction. You grow or you start to deteriorate. Know God better today than you did yesterday. Pursue him more. Next verse is in chapter 20, verse 18. Plans are established by counsel. By wise guidance, wage war. Now this is something Christians need to pick up more on. We're in a war. We actually need strategic counsel. We need to think through what it is we're doing. We need to appeal to our commander. We're in a war. We need wisdom, not just because it's good for me. It is, but that's not the only reason I need it. I need it because I'm in a spiritual war and participating in it. This is going to come up in a little bit as well. Our next verse is in chapter 21, verse 11. When a scoffer is punished, the simple become wise. When a wise man is instructed, he gains knowledge. There's something about discipline that's supposed to not just instruct the person being disciplined. We talk about this in Lamentations. When Israel's being judged and reproved by the Lord, one of the things that's supposed to be happening is the nations around are supposed to receive instruction about who God is. When punishment or discipline happens, others are supposed to gain wisdom. If they don't, they're foolish. And when a wise man is instructed, he gains knowledge. A wise person won't have to go to the point where they hit the consequence. They'll look at the cliff and say, what happens if I jump off that? And somebody says, well, you die. And they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I won't. And the scoffer's like, let me see. I need to check, just to be sure. Anybody who's played a video game's kind of like that? I wonder what happens if you jump off that. Yep, all right. But in life, you don't have that save, right? There's actual consequences you go through. Our next verse is in verse 30 of chapter 21. No wisdom, no understanding, no counsel can avail against the Lord. This returns us to the central need. All advice, if it's good, finds its source in our Creator. We have to understand that anything apart from that, anything contrary to that, isn't going to result in anything. The reason I need lots of elders around me and lots of wisdom around me, the reason I need that is because I need to figure out the will of the Lord. If I'm not after that, I'm after something else, anywhere that diverts from the will of the Lord, and now I'm a fool suddenly. I have to understand that the way the world is relies on its Creator. And we're foolish to ignore that. So even as we talk about the rest of this, anytime we talk about advice, this needs to stay in our minds. Return to the central need for God. No counsel and understanding, doesn't matter what it is, avails against him, because he is reality itself. Our next set of verses is what I read at the beginning. Incline your ear. This is chapter 22, beginning in verse 17. Incline your ear. Hear the words of the wise and apply them to your heart. Apply to your heart my knowledge, for it will be pleasant to keep them within you, if all of them are ready on your lips. There's something about receiving wisdom that to the wise starts to be pleasant. It isn't at first. This is important. It almost is never pleasant at first. This is something that's built up over time. The next verse is chapter 23, verse 9. Do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the good sense of your words. You see somebody acting foolish, and you're like, I know exactly what would fix this. I think I'm going to tell them. When we're foolish, we hate it. Oh, you know what's best for me, do you? Well, I'm going to do the opposite. That's the nature of foolishness. He's warning you to even try, right? They'll hate it. And you see how often in Proverbs this appeal to your affections comes in. Do you love it or do you hate it? We're going to start picking up speed just a little bit. We're almost done. Chapter 24, verses 5 and 6 are our next one. A wise man is full of strength. A man of knowledge enhances his might. For by wise guidance you can wage war, and in abundance of counselors there is victory. This ties wisdom and counsel and advice to strength. Somebody that's strong independently might start to think that because they're stronger than other people individually, that they're doing pretty well. But we're not designed to be isolated individuals. Wisdom and counsel actually will prevail against raw strength, because it in itself is part of the strength. If I'm physically strong and foolish, guess what? Well, I'm ultimately weak because I'm just following my impulses. I'm pouring all my strength into nothing. And we're waging war. We need each other, and we deny that at our own peril. Our next verse is in chapter 27. Chapter 27, verses 5 and 6. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. What good is something that's hidden? I love that person, but they have no idea. You don't tell them. You never show them. It's just hidden. Is that real love, even? Better open rebuke is what the proverb guy says. I'd rather actually just be told something that hurts than something that doesn't actually result in anything. And then the next verse, faithful are the wounds of a friend, and profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Pause for a second just to describe something that happens inside the church. You can kind of break down the different kinds of speech into four kinds. You got the soft, kind speech. You have the soft, wicked speech. You have the rough, kind speech, and the rough, wicked speech. Most people don't have a hard time ignoring rough, wicked. Like, oh, they're just mean. Yeah, I don't have to listen to that. Most of us have a hard time receiving rough, kind speech. Stuff that makes us feel, ugh, why are they rebuking me? They need to be a little softer. We'd rather it be soft, kind. That's the easiest kind. Oh, it's easy to hear and it's kind. That's my favorite kind, right? That's the stuff we kind of like try and hang out in, but not all of it is that way. In fact, probably less of it is that way than we think. The last kind, and the most insidious, is the soft wicked. We will take soft wicked over rough kind, often. I'd rather you just tell me something that's easy to hear. But profuse are the kisses of an enemy. An enemy loves soft wicked, because people just receive it. This is probably the one that's being pushed the most in our world today. As it works less, they move into rough wicked, but soft wicked, that's the starting point. It's the one that's the most tempting, and it's often the most dangerous. And so it's saying, faithful are the wounds of a friend. You should prefer rough and kind. And in theory we do, but when we encounter hard words spoken in a hard way, it's hard. It takes wisdom and strength and love for wisdom in order to receive. And we should like it more than soft wicked. But because it goes down easier, we prefer the other one. And this verse is warning against that. Our next verse, chapter 28, verse 9. If one turns away his ear from hearing the law, even his prayer is an abomination. That's pretty rough. He doesn't want to hear instruction. What do you think his prayers are doing? God gives his commands. He says, I don't want any of those, but I want him to listen to me. We talked about this in Lamentations. When people say, it's okay to be angry at God. You have to take into account that then it's okay for God to be angry with you. In fact, he's actually justified when he's angry at you. I'm not going to listen to God. I'm not going to listen to his commandments. I'm not going to do what he says, but I expect him to listen to me. That's quite a statement. It's quite an assumption. Even his prayers are an abomination. The hatred of God's instructions is going to come through in your prayers. What are you even going to ask for? The things you want, the things you like, they're not going to even be like, what are they going to be for? I want more of me. That's what I want, God. Well, he loves you, and so he's not going to give you that. Don't be surprised. Chapter 28, verse 26 is our next one. Whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered. For some reason, saying that he's a fool seems less harsh than saying he's stupid, but this is the same idea. The next one is chapter 29, verse 1. He who is often reproved, yet stiffens his neck, will suddenly be broken beyond healing. Right? This is something where you fall on the rock of Christ, or it will crush you. You humble yourself under his hand, or it will break you. You might feel for a little while that you get to do whatever you want, but that's not how it works. And our final verse, chapter 29, verse 12. If a ruler listens to falsehood, all his officials will be wicked. This is a description of leaders heeding bad advice and encouraging falsehood. When somebody that's driving the car starts encouraging falsehood and wickedness, guess what they're going to get more of? They're going to get more of wickedness and more falsehood. Somebody that starts out well, who just wants to be told that they're doing well instead of receiving hard instruction, is going to just be more of it. And everything around them, doesn't matter how they are at the beginning, eventually all the advice they're going to get is going to be bad. It incentivizes wickedness. See, there's a strength in being willing to hear what's uncomfortable if it's right, rather than what you just want to hear. This is a theme that kicks off Proverbs in chapter 1 and carries all the way through. Have the humility to receive instruction. The ultimate instruction of the scriptures is throw yourself at the mercy of Christ. You and your goodness are not going to attain it. That's what the advice of the scriptures is, and when you're talking about wise advice, that's what's going to come out. So there's three main points to everything we talked about. And I said these at the beginning, and I'm going to say them again. The first is you have to be humble enough to eat the pain of rebuke. You cannot just stand and say, I will not take on anything uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable, right? And you need to not just be okay with it, you need to start to love it. It's going to hurt. Now, you understand, there is a kind of hurt that's just coming from wicked intent. But if we're in a church full of other Christians who love each other, we ought to be able to give each other the kind of rebuke that's actually coming from love. This isn't a green light to go and tell everyone everything that bothers you, okay? This is an actual loving rebuke. You're destroying yourself, which is different than this bothers me. And you can kind of tell which one it is. And you can usually tell by how motivated you are to do it. If you're like really mad, I want to tell this person everything they've done wrong. You have all this gas in your emotional car to go and do the thing, but it's usually not because you love them. It's usually because you love yourself. When you see them destroying yourself and you're calm, oh man, that's too bad. You're not usually gassed up to do it. You're not usually motivated by anger enough to actually go into the uncomfortable situation and say it. I'm not saying this is a surefire way to tell, but being angrily motivated to do it is usually an indicator that you shouldn't. And being okay with not, and not really wanting to, might be an indicator that you should. I don't want to do that. That'll make them uncomfortable. It's like, well, better start praying about that then. Careful. All right, so this humility to receive and give out of love is the starting point. The other thing is you need to have the ability to tell if the advice you're getting is coming from someone who also has wisdom, who knows the scriptures, that also wants it. And like I said, there's a couple ways to do that. One of the ways is, do they receive instruction? Another way is, do they know the scriptures? Are they letting that form them? Do they know where the true good counselor is from the Bible? And if you know it, if you understand the scriptures and the thread of its message and the character of God, you'll be able to tell when somebody comes up and it rebukes you. Even if they don't do it perfectly, even if it's got all rough around the edges, you'll be able to receive the actual instruction that God has for you. Not because they're good, but because God's good. And the third thing is you need to be able to spot the evildoers, the people that come up and just tell you everything you want to hear. The ones that are like, you know what, none of that's your fault. It's all their fault. That's exactly what I want to hear. I want to hear that I didn't do anything wrong. But unfortunately, that's not usually the case. Usually, when I'm dealing with another sinner, guess what? I'm also a sinner. So part of it's probably me. This is something that I try to focus on whenever I'm working through a problem with someone. If somebody comes into my office or comes to me for friendly advice, it doesn't do very much for me to talk about all the ways someone else needs to change. No, I need to talk to the person in front of me. What can you do? And that's a lot more painful. It's a lot harder when I say, oh, you're here, so you need to sacrifice for them. But they're not behaving rightly. Potentially, but they're not here, right? You understand that often when we're giving advice, it's easier to just rebuke the other person that's not there rather than speak to the problem that's right in front of us. So here's some considerations when you're thinking about this. It might even help you to go and ask for advice from somebody. And also, for those of us that want to be like Christ, here's some things to ask yourself. Consider the kind of advice that you'll get from people that you want to be like. That person has a relationship with God that I want to emulate. Well, you might go ask them what you can do for that then. Consider if the person that's giving you the rebuke takes their own advice. Sometimes they'll give you good advice that they don't take. Sometimes they'll be following a righteous path and they'll give you bad advice. Like this person was successful and righteous, and they give a bunch of people bad advice. This is actually kind of happening a lot nowadays, where people achieved something in a certain way, and they're giving everyone else this bad advice. They attained their position this way, and they say, actually, what you need to do is you don't need to sacrifice at all, do what you love. And you're like, did that person do what they love, or did they work hard at something that was really unpleasant for a long time? Basically, check if they have skin in the game. If they're just giving advice for something that doesn't affect them at all. And consider how well they know God, first and foremost. You can receive wisdom from worldly people that don't love God, but it needs to be contextualized in the world that God made in order for it to be useful. If we're just talking practicality, right? Proverbs is full of that. And the thing that it centers on is where's the true good advice coming from in the scriptures? And it's coming from people that understand the way the world is and aren't trying to circumnavigate it. See, oftentimes fools kind of understand, if I want to be healthy, I need to eat right and exercise. But is there a way I can get around that? Is there a way I can sort of cheat? It's like, I want to be healthy in like 2 weeks. Is there a pill I can take? Or I know that wealth and prosperity comes with hard work. Is there a way that I can just do it in a month? Or less than that? Maybe I play the lottery, right? There's this way the world works, and I want to get around it somehow, right? But for Christians, we want to see the way the world works, and we want to work with it and love the instruction that it brings about that. So much of what we talk about, especially in Proverbs, really comes down to affections. Do you love the Lord? Do you love the way he made the world? Or are you reluctantly agreeing because nothing else works? It's not sustainable if that's what you're doing. A love for God means a love for his instruction. I'm going to keep harping on that because that's the theme of the scriptures. It isn't enough just to obey and follow. You want to love who he is and what he does. One of the ways you do that is you understand you're not an isolated individual and you need the people around you. You need to receive their advice. You need to understand that what you do affects them. As our world fractures, it's going to become more obvious if that's the case. We're going to start to need each other more, so let's start understanding what that means now. You're not isolated. What you do affects others. And that's not bad. That's good. That's something to love. And now you have a lot of people to love too. Thank you for bearing with me through our journey in Proverbs. Let's go to the Lord.